What if I told you that the hardest, most rigid-looking part of your body, the bones holding you up right now, are not dead, not fixed, but alive, constantly breaking themselves down and rebuilding like a secret construction site hidden inside you? Shocking, isn't it? We grow up thinking bones are just stiff sticks holding our muscles together. We joke about skeletons, we hang them up on Halloween, we imagine them as lifeless relics. But the truth is completely upside down. Your bones are dynamic, living tissue. They listen to your diet, they respond to your workouts, and they quietly record your lifestyle choices in their very structure. Ignore them, and they crumble. Challenge them, and they become stronger than steel. That's why today's journey is so important, because what I discovered changed the way I look at my own health. And I want to take you inside your bones, yes, inside, to reveal how food and exercise reshape them in ways most of us never imagined. Welcome to the Wellness Way. If you're ready to uncover the hidden truth about your own skeleton, stay with me until the end. And don't forget, hit subscribe so we can keep bringing you more life-changing insights every week. When most of us picture bones, we see them as something cold, lifeless, and unchanging. Skeletons are the props of Halloween, symbols of death, or the brittle remains uncovered by archaeologists. I used to think of bones that way too. Silent sticks buried beneath our skin, doing nothing more than propping up the muscles and organs we actually care about. But what if I told you that this entire mental picture is upside down? What if bones aren't dead at all, but one of the most dynamic, responsive, and astonishing tissues in the human body? That realization hit me like a shock. Bones are not passive. They are alive. They are in constant dialogue with the rest of your body. They tear themselves down and rebuild themselves every single day, shaping and reshaping in response to how you live. Every bite you eat, every step you take, every weight you lift sends a message to your skeleton. And your skeleton answers either by growing stronger or by quietly weakening when neglected. This truth reframes everything we think we know about our own bodies. It also forces us to confront an uncomfortable idea. Our lifestyle choices are etched literally into our bones. You can't see it happening, but the results will reveal themselves years down the road, in resilience and vitality or in fragility and pain. Breaking the illusion of permanent. Bones may look permanent, but they are more like living construction sites. Specialized cells called osteoclasts constantly break down old bone tissue, while their counterparts, osteoblasts, lay down new layers. If these two processes are balanced, your bone density stays stable. But the balance is fragile. When osteoclasts outpace osteoblasts, density drops and bones become weaker. When osteoblasts get the upper hand, bones strengthen. What really startled me was how much control we actually have over this process. For years I assumed bone strength was dictated by genetics or age, but the science shows otherwise. Our bones are incredibly sensitive to the forces we place on them, and they adapt to meet those demands. Sit too much, live too passively, and your bones begin to waste away. Push them through exercise and fuel them with the right nutrients, and they respond by becoming denser, tougher, more resilient. Think about that. The very material of your skeleton listens to your habits. That's not just biology. It feels like a mirror held up to our lives. The paradox of strength and fragility. There's another paradox here that fascinated me. Bones are both harder than steel and yet terrifyingly fragile, depending on how we treat them. What gives bones their strength is not a single substance, but the marriage of two very different materials. First, there's hydroxyapatite, a crystal-like compound built from calcium and phosphate. This is what gives bones their hardness, their ability to resist crushing forces. Without hydroxyapatite, our skeletons would be as soft as clay. Then there's collagen, a protein we usually associate with skin or tendons. Collagen gives bones their flexibility, their ability to resist pulling and bending forces. Without collagen, bones would shatter like glass at the smallest impact. In a healthy skeleton, about 55% of bone is hydroxyapatite, and about 30% is collagen. It's this ratio, this perfect balance, that makes bones strong but not brittle, rigid but not breakable. When that balance is disrupted, diseases emerge. Children who don't get enough vitamin D can't absorb calcium properly, so they can't form enough hydroxyapatite. Their bones bend under their own weight, leading to rickets. On the other side of the spectrum, people with a rare genetic condition called osteogenesis imperfecta can't make enough collagen. Their bones become so fragile they can fracture from everyday movements, earning the nickname brittle bone disease. The lesson here is humbling. Strength is never about just one thing. It's about balance. Too much hardness without flexibility leads to breaking. Too much flexibility without hardness leads to collapse. And isn't that true of life in general? Bones as living records. Another fact that changed the way I see myself: bones are not just structural. They are archives of our choices. Inside spongy bone lies red bone marrow, the birthplace of red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. Your bones don't just hold you up, they keep you alive. And their microscopic structures adapt to the stresses you put on them. The tiny beams of spongy bone, called trabeculae, align themselves along the exact lines of force your body experiences. Jump, lift, run, climb, and your skeleton remodels itself to withstand those forces. Sit idle, and the opposite happens. The architecture of your bones literally thins out. The most extreme example comes from astronauts. In zero gravity, with no weight-bearing stress, they lose 15 to 20% of their bone density in just a few months. That's bone mass that takes years to rebuild, if it can be fully rebuilt at all. It's proof that bones operate under a use it or lose it rule. If they aren't challenged, they don't stay. A wake-up call for our own lives. This isn't just an anatomy lesson, it's a wake-up call. If astronauts can lose 1/5 of their skeleton in months, what do you think happens to us when we spend decades chained to desks, skipping workouts, or eating diets stripped of calcium, vitamin D, and protein? The slow erosion of bone might not be visible today, but it's happening in the background, preparing the stage for fractures, loss of mobility, and osteoporosis in later life. For women, the danger is even greater. Estrogen acts as a natural shield against bone loss, keeping osteoclasts in check. But after menopause, that shield drops almost overnight. That's why women are up to 8 times more likely to develop osteoporosis than men. Men are not immune, but their testosterone declines gradually, giving their skeletons more time to adjust. To me, this knowledge doesn't just feel scientific, it feels deeply personal. It reframes aging not as something we must surrender to, but as something we can actively influence. The decisions I make now, what I eat, how I move, how much I challenge my body, are shaping the very scaffolding that will carry me decades from now. Rethinking the skeleton. So now, when I think of bones, I don't see lifeless sticks. I see construction sites, constantly buzzing with activity. I see archives of my habits, storing every choice I make. I see guardians of my future, silently deciding whether I'll spend my later years standing tall and strong, or bent and brittle. And that realization gives me a sense of responsibility, because once you understand that your bones are alive, that they respond to everything you do, you can't unknow it. The skeleton is no longer a forgotten background character. It's the lead actor in the story of your health. The real question becomes, what story will your bones tell about you? When I first heard someone describe bones as living architecture, I thought it sounded poetic but exaggerated. Architecture is something we associate with cathedrals, skyscrapers, bridges, grand designs made of steel and stone. But the more I learned, the more I realized, bones deserve that same level of awe. They are architectural marvels, not built by engineers but by nature itself. And once you take a closer look inside, the mystery of their design is as breathtaking as any man-made structure. The compact fortress imagine slicing through the shaft of a femur, the largest bone in your body. At first glance, it looks like a dense, solid column, a fortress wall, built to withstand anything. But zoom in under a microscope and you discover something astonishing. It isn't solid at all. Inside, the fortress is organized into repeating units called osteons. Each osteon looks like a series of concentric rings, almost like tree rings frozen into stone. At the very center runs a canal, carrying blood vessels that snake through the supposedly solid bone. Those vessels deliver nutrients, oxygen, and remove waste. The cells trapped within each ring, called osteocytes, are far from isolated. They extend tiny arms, reaching out to touch one another, creating an interconnected web across the rings. This blew my mind. Bone cells don't just sit passively inside stone. They connect, they communicate, they form a living network woven into the hardness around them. That microscopic teamwork is why compact bone is so strong. It isn't just rock, it's living rock. And yet, the elegance of design goes deeper. All the osteons are aligned in the same direction, parallel to the length of the bone. It's the same principle engineers use when they lay steel reinforcements in concrete. The alignment gives bones an incredible ability to resist the forces that try to bend or snap them. The more I studied this, the more I realized that compact bone isn't just a wall. It's a fortress reinforced with a blueprint of mathematical precision. The sponge that isn't soft. If compact bone is the fortress, spongy bone is the hidden cathedral inside it. The name spongy bone might sound weak, but don't be fooled. This is where nature's brilliance becomes even more apparent. Spongy bone is made up of delicate struts, called trabeculae, arranged in a three-dimensional lattice. At first glance, it looks random, like the holes in a sponge or coral reef. But in reality, these struts are meticulously oriented along the exact lines of stress the bone experiences. If you jump, run, or lift, the forces traveling through your skeleton are mirrored in the architecture of spongy bone. It's as though your body is constantly redrawing blueprints, reinforcing beams wherever pressure demands it. Even more remarkable, the spaces between the trabeculae are not empty. They cradle red bone marrow, the birthplace of life itself. Here, new red blood cells emerge to carry oxygen, white blood cells to fight infection, and platelets to clot your wounds. Every heartbeat pumps blood through bone, weaving nutrition, defense, and repair into the structure of your skeleton. The symbolism struck me deeply. Bones aren't just the scaffolding of the body, they're the factory of vitality, silently producing the very elements that keep us alive. A dance between hardness and flexibility. The more I learned, the more I realized bones are a masterpiece of balance. Their strength comes not only from architecture, but also from chemistry. Think of hydroxyapatite, the crystalline mineral made of calcium and phosphate. It's what makes bones hard, giving them compressive strength, the ability to withstand crushing forces. Without it, you couldn't stand upright. But hardness alone is not enough. If bones were purely mineral, they would shatter under sudden stress. That's where collagen enters the scene. Collagen is a protein fiber woven throughout bone, giving it tensile strength, the ability to resist pulling and bending. Without collagen, bones become brittle. Without hydroxyapatite, bones become soft. Only together do they create the paradoxical material we rely on every second of our lives. Rigid yet flexible, strong yet forgiving. I couldn't help but reflect. Isn't this a metaphor for resilience in life? Strength without flexibility is fragility in disguise. True endurance comes from balance. Lessons from disease. Nothing illustrates the importance of this balance more than the diseases that arise when it breaks down. Rickets and osteomalacia, often caused by vitamin D deficiency, rob bones of hydroxyapatite. Without the mineral crystals, bones become soft, bending under pressure. Children with rickets sometimes grow with bowed legs, their skeletons unable to bear their own weight. On the other side lies osteogenesis imperfecta, or brittle bone disease, a condition where collagen is lacking. Here, bones are packed with mineral but stripped of flexibility. They break with the gentlest impact, leaving sufferers vulnerable from childhood. These conditions reminded me that bone health is not a one-note story of calcium alone. It's a symphony of nutrients, hormones, and stresses. Ignore any part of the orchestra, and the music falters. The skeleton as storyteller. What fascinated me most is how bones tell the story of our lives. Forensic scientists can read bones like diaries, uncovering age, nutrition, even past injuries. But even before death, our skeleton is speaking. It just whispers quietly. Every workout we complete, every meal we eat, every vitamin we absorb, the skeleton records it. Strengthened trabeculi after years of running, thinning struts after months of inactivity, denser femurs from weight training, fragile vertebrae from poor nutrition. Your skeleton is the silent witness of your habits, writing your biography in mineral and collagen. That realization shifted the way I think about health. Bones are not passive props. They're participants. They don't just support us, they respond to us. Awe in the ordinary. Standing back, I began to see bones not just as body parts, but as marvels of engineering hidden in plain sight. A fortress on the outside, a cathedral within, balanced between crystal and fiber, alive with blood and cells. It's easy to take them for granted, but when you pause and truly look, the skeleton is one of the most extraordinary creations of nature. And here's the thought that lingers. If bones are this dynamic, this alive, this responsive to what we do, then how can we ignore them? How can we spend years living as though they're just background scenery? The architecture of your bones is not fixed. It's being drawn and redrawn every day of your life. The real question is, what kind of architecture are you building for your future? For most of my life, I believed bone health was dictated by age. Children had growing bones, adults had stable bones, and the elderly had weak bones. It seemed like a natural decline, something out of our control. But the deeper I looked into the science, the more I realized that story is only half true. Age matters, yes, but lifestyle is the true architect of our skeleton. Bones are not passive structures slowly crumbling with time. They are living tissues, sensitive to the stresses we place on them and the nutrients we give them. They thrive on challenge and suffer in its absence. This discovery completely reshaped the way I view my own daily habits. Use it or lose it. One of the most striking examples comes from astronauts. When they leave Earth's gravity and spend weeks or months in the weightlessness of space, they return with a frightening surprise. Their bones have lost 15 to 20% of their density. These were healthy, fit individuals when they launched. But without the constant stress of gravity, their bones essentially decided, why keep this extra mass if I don't need it? This is the principle of bone health in a nutshell. Use it or lose it. Bones adapt to the forces we put on them. Without stress, they shed density. With stress, they grow stronger. It's a biological form of efficiency, but it carries consequences. For astronauts, the consequence is rapid bone loss. For the rest of us, the consequence is decades of sitting, minimal movement, and a slow but steady decline in bone strength. The power of exercise. The good news is that exercise works in the opposite direction. When you run, jump, or lift weights, your bones don't just carry the load, they respond to it. Osteoblasts, the bone-building cells, outpace osteoclasts, the bone breakers, and density increases. It's like adding reinforcements to a bridge every time traffic gets heavier. I found this realization empowering. Suddenly, exercise wasn't just about building muscle or losing fat. It was about building a stronger skeleton that could carry me through decades of life. Every squat, every push-up, every jog became a kind of investment, not in how I look today, but in how I'll move and live tomorrow. And the best part is, it doesn't require extreme workouts. Moderate, consistent weight-bearing activities, things like brisk walking, running, dancing, resistance training, are enough to stimulate the response. The skeleton doesn't need perfection, it just needs challenge. The role of nutrition, of course, stress alone isn't enough. Even the most beautifully designed building collapses without the right materials. That's where nutrition steps in. Calcium is the most obvious player. Without it, your body can't form hydroxyapatite, the mineral crystals that give bones their strength. But calcium is useless without vitamin D. Vitamin D acts as the gatekeeper, helping your intestines absorb calcium into the bloodstream. Without vitamin D, you can consume all the calcium you want, and your bones will still starve. Protein is equally important. Collagen, the flexible fiber woven through bone, is made of protein. Without enough dietary protein, you can't produce the collagen scaffolding that gives bone its toughness. When I learned this, it reframed how I think about food. A glass of milk or a piece of salmon isn't just calories. It's raw material for the very beams and foundations inside me. Every meal is either building my skeleton or allowing it to weaken. Women and the hidden risk. There's another layer to this story that struck me deeply. The gender gap in bone health. Women, particularly after menopause, face a dramatically higher risk of osteoporosis than men. Why? Because estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone, it's also a guardian of bone. Estrogen slows down osteoclasts, the cells that break down bone. When estrogen drops sharply after menopause, those osteoclasts are no longer held back. Bone is broken down faster than it's rebuilt, and density plummets. The statistics are sobering. Women are up to 8 times more likely to develop osteoporosis than men. Fractures from osteoporosis are not just painful. They can be life-altering, robbing people of independence in their later years. But here's the hopeful side. Lifestyle still matters. Women who build bone strength early through consistent exercise and nutrient-rich diets enter menopause with a stronger foundation. That reserve of density acts like savings in the bank, protecting them even as natural losses occur. To me, this wasn't just science, it was a call to action. It reminded me that prevention starts young, long before symptoms appear. Rethinking aging. All of this made me question the way we think about aging. Too often we assume fragility is inevitable, that weak bones are just the price of getting old. But what if much of that fragility is preventable? What if the choices we make in our 20s, 30s and 40s determine whether our 60s and 70s are defined by freedom or frailty? I don't say this to inspire fear, but to inspire responsibility. Bone density peaks in our early 30s. After that, it naturally declines. But how fast it declines depends on us. Exercise slows the drop. Nutrition slows the drop. Even small, consistent choices compound into massive differences decades later. That perspective shifted my motivation. Suddenly, skipping exercise didn't feel like just one lazy day. It felt like letting go of the scaffolding that will hold me upright in the future. Passing on nutrient-rich foods didn't feel trivial. It felt like denying my body the bricks it needs to build my future self, living with awareness. What struck me most after diving into this research is how silent the whole process is. You can't feel your bones weakening. You can't hear the trabeculae thinning or the osteoclasts outpacing the osteoblasts. By the time fragility becomes obvious, years of damage have already occurred. That silence is what makes awareness so powerful. Once you know bones are alive, responsive, and dependent on your choices, it's impossible to go back to ignoring them. Every step, every bite, every workout becomes part of the architecture you'll rely on for the rest of your life. A personal reflection. For me, the biggest shift was realizing that bone health isn't separate from the rest of my life. It is my life. My ability to walk, travel, play, work, even just get out of bed in the morning decades from now, depends on what my skeleton can handle. And unlike so many aspects of health that feel uncertain or out of reach, bone health is remarkably within our control. The formula is simple. Move more, eat better, don't wait until it's too late. Bones reward effort. They respond to care. So now, when I lace up my shoes for a run or choose a nutrient-rich meal, I remind myself, I'm not just feeding muscles or burning calories. I'm shaping the foundation of my future. Closing thought. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. Bones are not passengers on the journey of life. They are drivers. Treat them well and they will carry you farther than you imagined. Neglect them and they will remind you, harshly, that nothing in the body lasts without care. The choice is ours, written in the architecture of our skeleton. What kind of bones will you build for your future? When I look back on everything I've learned about bones, one idea rises above the rest. Bones are not silent passengers in our lives. They are active participants. They are alive, constantly listening to what we do, reshaping themselves in response to our choices. That realization has changed the way I see health, aging, and even daily habits. For years I thought bone weakness was something that simply happened with age, an unavoidable decline. But the truth is far more empowering. Yes, age plays a role, but diet, exercise, and lifestyle choices are the real architects of our skeletal future. Every step we take, every nutrient we consume, every time we challenge our bodies, we are either building or dismantling our foundation. To me, that's not just science. It's a philosophy of living. Bones teach us that strength is not about being rigid, nor is resilience about being soft. True strength is balance, the hardness of minerals paired with the flexibility of collagen, the breakdown of old tissue paired with the creation of new. Life, like bone, thrives on this dance between opposing forces. Personally, this knowledge has made me more intentional. When I run, I imagine my osteoblasts laying down new layers of support. When I eat foods rich in calcium, vitamin D, and protein, I picture the raw materials weaving into my skeleton. And when I think about skipping exercise or neglecting nutrition, I remind myself, the cost will not appear today, but it will be written into my bones tomorrow. The deeper lesson is simple but profound. Health is not passive. It is built day by day through small actions. Bones may be hidden from view, but they are always watching, always recording, always adapting. So here's my invitation. Think of your skeleton not as a background structure, but as a living partner in your journey. Care for it, challenge it, feed it, and it will reward you with strength, mobility, and freedom for decades to come. And now I want to ask you something simple. What's one small habit you could start today to take better care of your bones? Whether it's a short walk, a healthy meal, or simply getting a little sunlight. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective, and so would others. Let's learn from each other and build stronger futures together. And if you found this journey valuable, don't forget to subscribe to The Wellness Way. Your support helps us keep creating content that empowers, educates, and inspires. Together, we can keep uncovering the hidden truths of health and the human body.